Thanks for joining us on our time control webinar today. Today we're going to be talking about how to become compliant with the U.S. Defense Contract Audit Agency requirements for a labor charging system, and specifically how you can configure the time control timesheet system to be DCAA compliant. My name is Chris Vandersloos, and I'm from HMS Software. I'll be talking to you for the next few minutes about DCAA and how to use time control. HMS Software was founded in 1984. We're specialists in timesheet systems and enterprise project management systems. And time control, the product we're going to be talking about today, was first released to the market in 1994. HMS has been partnered with numerous technology companies, including Microsoft since 1995, the Oracle Primavera team since 97, with Deltek was once Welcome Software back in the mid-80s, and Hard Dollar since 2012. HMS has a long history of working in the defense and aerospace industry. We've worked on large-scale projects that have required DCAA compliance, and with numerous clients in defense, aerospace, energy, and security where DCAA compliance is a requirement. When we start talking about timesheet systems, it's important to understand that there are many different kinds of timesheet systems. The most popular kind of timesheet will be a time and attendance system. Time and attendance we typically find in HR, payroll, ERP kinds of systems, where we say, was someone here or not? Do we need to pay them or not? Was this an exception day, like a vacation day or a sick leave day, or not? So very, very common. The next most common kind of timesheet would probably be time and billing, where we know we're going to need to invoice someone, and we'd like to make sure that we have sufficient information required in order to create that invoice and justify that invoice later. When we have a project management system, then having a timesheet to be able to update the project management system is another type of timesheet. In that case, we have a list of tasks that we had expected to do. We had a budget or an expectation of how long it would take us to do those tasks, and the timesheet then allows us to record the actual time it took to complete those tasks and compare it against the budget. And then for a wide range of other requirements, we have timesheets for research credit, for taxes, for DCAA compliance, and more. Our idea with time control is to have a single timesheet that would be flexible enough to meet all of these requirements at the same time. And as you'll see when we're talking about the DCAA requirements, there's an expectation that different elements of these kinds of timesheets are included in a single process and in a single system. The Defense Contract Audit Agency is a U.S. agency which started its existence working on the auditing of defense contracts, but has now expanded to work for numerous American federal and even state agencies to help with standards for managing procurement, managing contracts, and applying good practices to government-funded projects. The agency does audits of defense projects and of other projects when requested, and has a number of standards that are required, not just in timesheets, but for a wide range of procurement, financial, and invoicing standards, as well as timesheets. You can find information on the DCAA, the Defense Contract Audit Agency, at the U.S. site www.dcaa.mil. Okay, when we look inside of the DCAA criteria, and in particular in the information for contractors document that the DCAA provides right on its website, and provides whenever there is a government contract, we can see that there's a number of criteria that are very specific for timesheets, and these fall inside of a category the DCAA calls a labor charging system. In order to create invoices for work that you'll be doing for the government that have to be DCAA compliant, the government wants to make sure that you are billing only for the work that you did, that you are billing for the appropriate number of hours, and that the work can be audited and the invoice can be audited. They've done an enormous number of contracts over the years. There's a great deal of expertise in the DCAA to make sure that these kinds of contracts can be properly tracked and that the government money is being well spent. Here's some of the key criteria that the DCAA lists for what they expect in a time card system or a timesheet system. First of all, they'd like to know that you're going to have procedures, and these procedures are going to be documented and recorded, displayed to people. They'd like to know that you are going to separate the timekeeping and the payroll responsibilities. So you have to be able to be distinct over paying somebody versus making sure that the time spent that is being invoiced and being tracked against a project, that this is distinct. The employee has to be made aware of responsibilities for themselves, including, and this is very important, that the employee is recording their own timesheet unless there is a stated exception. They have to be doing their own timesheet data. They have to be doing the work daily. If there are any changes to that timesheet, the employee must be able to sign off on them. And finally, we used to say writing a timesheet with a signature in ink, but these days the DCAA refers to that as certifying the timesheet. But that is to say that we want to say that the employee has some mechanism to go, yes, those are my hours, yes, that is my approval mark, and I have personally approved those hours, and I'm prepared to answer for them. We want to make sure that the work is designated for tasks and projects that have been properly identified and can be tracked back to a project tracking system. We want to make sure we track all of the hours, both paid and unpaid. We want to make sure that there's an approval mechanism, so a supervisor approves these hours. We want to be able to track uncompensated overtime. There are exceptions for what if somebody is absent, how do we do a timesheet for them? Or what if someone is traveling, how do we deal with a timesheet for that person? And we want to make sure that the timesheet that is entered manages the time for work completed, for work accomplished. And finally, we want to make sure that employees understand that a timesheet entry and doing a good timesheet with accurate data, that employees acknowledge that this is part of their job, part of their responsibility. Well, so that's the criteria from the DCAA. How do we get that all into time control? Time control has been used in numerous occasions for clients in these kinds of environments, and a number of features in time control lend itself very well to DCAA compliance. Let's start off with the very flexible dashboard. On the front page of time control, when a user logs in, an administrator can establish virtually anything they'd like in different squares of the dashboard. In this case, you can see that on the right-hand side of the dashboard, the timesheet procedures for the organization are right there on the screen. This can include links to other elements, including training elements like a video or to other documentation. We can put any kind of text or HTML into a dashboard view, and in this way, an administrator can make sure that the current timesheet procedures are right there where the employees can see them inside the timesheet. No need to wonder where that binder is, or did we record that, or did I remember to do the right thing? They can see the procedures right inside the system. Now, being able to keep track of payroll and timekeeping separately is very important, and we are able to do this inside of time control by having different kinds of rates and different kinds of validation rules, so that we can use the same system for keeping the source data of the timesheet, and yet have the data go in one aspect back to billing or to project management, and in another aspect off to payroll. In fact, approvals in time control include something called the matrix approval process for labor actuals. This allows us to do approvals for billing and approvals for payroll for the organizational element of the company inside the same process, but by different people. So we're able to keep those tracks distinct and yet use the same source data. Now, the employee is supposed to enter their timesheet daily, and it's great to remind people of that. We can have time control send an automated email out perhaps on a Tuesday, but only to people who have not done their timesheet the day before, to say you haven't started your timesheet yet. But how does a supervisor determine that everyone in their department has done their hours? Well, time control includes reports and views such as this one in the drill down analyzer that is not looking for posted data. In this case, we're looking for draft data that is currently being entered or has been entered in the current week for existing employees. So we can see that some people have entered work on Tuesday, but perhaps not on Wednesday yet. So we're able to immediately look and see whether people in this department entered their hours for yesterday. We can also use this to be able to do a filter on this view and say, show me only those people who had no hours yesterday, or only those people who had hours less than 8 yesterday, in that manner being able to determine who didn't do a complete timesheet for yesterday's work. So that's a standard view in time control. We want to make sure that, the DCAA wants to make sure that people who did the work record the time. Well, that makes sense. We'd like the person who actually did the work to say, yes, I spent 8 hours on that task. That's pretty much the raw data that we're looking for. And time control includes the ability to say, who was the source of this timesheet? In this case, Gail Robinson was the one who created it. It's going to go to Tom Logan for approval. But time control goes quite a bit further. We can actually see who did each line of this timesheet. So in this case, Gail Robinson was the person who entered each of these lines. If there is a post-period adjustment, a change in the timesheet a couple of weeks from now that is done by administration, even if it's approved by Gail, which would be a requirement for the DCAA and which time control supports, we would see who actually did the entry, who actually did the changes on this timesheet, and be able to track that back. So knowing who entered this timesheet, who the source of it was, and who entered these lines, very important. Time control includes some functions to be able to ensure that that end users are the ones who make the entries and changes to their timesheet, and if any changes are done by anyone else, that the employee is the one who's able to see these and approve them. We do this in a couple of areas of time control. In the system preferences, which is global, we have an option here which says only the source, only the person who created this timesheet can actually modify it. Well, that's a DCAA requirement to say I want to make sure that the employee who created the timesheet is the only one who can make any changes. If that's the case, then even if the supervisor has control over it momentarily while they do an approval or reject of the timesheet, they cannot make any additions or any changes. Regardless of whether a supervisor could make changes, we always keep the information that the employee themselves entered. The second option here allows us to determine when a timesheet was released for approval or rejected and then re-released for approval, when it was approved. We can trace that timesheet to determine who handed off that timesheet for approval and when did the original user submit it. Very, very important for another DCAA criteria, which is to say how do we certify who did the work and when it was released. In the user profiles, which is done by group, we can control how we deal with post-period changes, which time control calls a debit-credit function. In this case, it says when you make a debit credit, we are going to release the debit credit for approval as per the existing release structure. That means that no matter which administrator makes the change, it will go back to the employee for approval. And the employee can reject those changes or they can accept them. If they accept them, then they would go naturally to the employee supervisor and then on into the posted data. In that case, we'd be able to determine who made the change because we control that line by line. So another very key function for time control. Certifying the timesheet says who was it who said, that's my timesheet and I am releasing it for approval. In this case, we can see Gail released this. It was owned by Gail. It went to Tom Logan. Its status was released. We have the timestamp to say exactly what time of the day and what day of the what was the date that was released. So we can go in and say, yes, we know that Gail released her timesheet for approval to Tom. In fact, we can even audit back to say yes, and then Tom rejected it, and then Gail re-released it. We have complete audit of the movement of that timesheet as it changed hands. Same thing goes for any adjustment. If an adjustment was created post-period, we can go back and say, yes, that adjustment was created by John, the administrator. John gave it back to Gail. Gail approved it. Tom then approved it, and it went into the posted data. We'll be able to see the movement of that change as well. One of the standards is to make sure that we are not typing in random numbers that can never be audited, but that we are working from a standard list of project and task and assignment information. Time control does a list of this in a hierarchical fashion. So no matter how many thousands of tasks might exist in a project, time control can show that in a simple hierarchy so that end users can select from that list. End users cannot enter a timesheet charge code to put time against if that code doesn't exist. Moreover, an administrator can close a charge once that charge is complete. Or they can make the status of a charge unopened, which is to say not yet open for charging, and use time control filtering to make sure that those charges do not appear when they're not open for charging. So this is a way that we can ensure that we're only putting data into the correct hours when we get started. One of the criteria is being able to track not just paid time, but banked or unpaid time. Time control allows us to do that with an unlimited flexibility in the rate structure. Here we can see that we have banked overtime, non-compensated overtime, paid overtime, and standard time. All of these are possible charges for Gale. In each of these codes, there are up to 9 values. Now, we don't see the values here because we're looking at it from an end user perspective. But an administrator could use this for, here's the billing amount, here's the payroll amount, and keep those things separate and distinct so that we're showing the calculations for one purpose in one way and another purpose in another. Rates, while it may be one of the simplest tables in time control, is enormously powerful in the flexibility we can apply to different kinds of timesheet requirements. Supervisors have to be able to approve or reject time. Here we can see that the timesheet from Gale has been handed off to Tom. Tom is currently owning it. We can see that Gale is the source person for each of these lines. And we can see that Tom can release or reject this timesheet. So in this way, we can have a supervisor approve those hours and send them back. Under no circumstances can the supervisor simply delete the line that was created by somebody else. And when only source can modify timesheet, they cannot even add or insert additional lines. Now, what happens when somebody is absent? Well, if they're absent, then a supervisor can create a timesheet for somebody who is not there. We keep track of who was the source of the timesheet, even if that data was entered for someone else. And as we saw on the right-hand side of the timesheet, we would then see the supervisor's name as the person who entered that data rather than the employee. If an employee has started doing a timesheet but couldn't complete it, the supervisor can change the ownership. They can grab that timesheet and move it upwards to them to take control of it. There's also an ability to do delegation, where someone can sign in as though there's someone else if given permission to do so. And in all of those cases, time control is keeping track of who was actually in the system, who actually entered that line of data, who did that approval, who moved that data, even if it looks like it's someone else. If we have someone who is gone for an extended period, a supervisor can enter a timesheet for that person. So if there's someone who's working outside the office without reliable access to the internet or unable to do their timesheet while they're away, a supervisor could do a timesheet on their behalf. Again, we would see the audit of who actually entered that data. But it's also important to remember that time control works as a mobile interface. It works as a over the web. So if there is access to the internet wherever that employee is, they should be able to do their timesheet even though they're not in the office. Delegation is another way that we can deal with this for someone who's going to be gone for an extended period. When delegation is turned on, here we see Joseph Gardner has logged into time control and is being informed before they go any further they can log in as themselves, or both David Taylor and Eric Vincent have made Joseph their delegate, which means Joseph can elect to log in as these people. If Joseph was to say, I'd like to log in as David Taylor, time control would say, welcome David back to time control, and Joseph would now have all of the rights and privileges and data, however restricted, that David Taylor would have. So Joseph would be basically operating in time control as though he was David Taylor. But in the background, time control is maintaining an audit of who really entered that data and who was really in the system. At the top of the screen, Joseph would see something, would see in the user area to say username David Taylor, and then in brackets, Joseph Gardner, to say we really know who you are, and we are keeping track of that in the background. So approvals would say approved by David Taylor, and then in a separate field to say who was being delegated by Joseph. One of the core principles of time control is not just when the employee was at work, but what did they do with their time? And there are numerous ways that we can track that with time control and take advantage of that, not the least of which is the ability to link time control directly back to a project management system like OpenPlan or Primavera or Microsoft Project or Project Server. Being able to have the links directly from project management right into the timesheet so that people are updating the work that they actually did. And advancing not just the actual hours, but also the estimate to complete for that work. So tying the project management functionality right into the timesheet system brings the timesheet right into the idea of progressing our work, and that focuses us on what people are actually spending their time on. When audits are done when floor audits are done of this to say what are you actually working on, being able to match the timesheet to the progress on the task to the project schedule that's being advanced is a certain way of being able to say yes, we know that the right thing is being charged at this time. It's key to make sure that people understand what the timesheet is for them and how important it is for their job. And the dashboard again it gives us an ability to be able to display to end users some of the key important information. We can show some results of their timesheet. We can show timesheets that they may not have done. We can show status of everything from banked overtime hours or banked vacation time to the status for a supervisor of where are my employees' timesheets so far for the week. Things like automated email notification for your timesheet is missing, or your timesheet is incomplete, or your timesheet has not yet been submitted for approval, or another way of reminding people that timesheet information is key and critical to what we're doing. So inside time control, when someone says, well, we have time control, where do we need to look to ensure we're DCAA compliant? There's really 5 different elements that you have to make sure you do early on in your configuration. One, in the system preferences, change the settings to only source may modify the timesheet. Also in system settings, in the user profile for settings, change the debit credit to original release path. That may be the default, but that's key. Create a timesheet report or use the drill down analyzer as we saw to be able to show a daily view for hours entered each day, so we can have supervisors able to check that their employees entered time for yesterday. And in system settings, turn the logging on for the release release log so that we can see the audit log of the movement of timesheets. Finally, you're going to have to make sure that you create a timesheet process publish that process to your employees so that they know what the process is. Make sure that process is clear, and you can put that right into your dashboard so that people have access to it immediately. Okay, well, that's DCAA compliant functionality, but what else is in time control? Gosh, a lot. We haven't been able to show you everything. We talked about the matrix approval process, and there's another webcast right here on the time control website called the matrix approval process for labor actuals, where you can actually see us talk about this approval process and see how we do both organizational and project-based approvals inside the same process. The matrix approval process allows us to have an approval process for all work done by the employee for the week, as well as all work done by all employees for a particular task or a particular project. Project managers will be interested in what work was done on my project, or what do I need to charge for on my project, where HR department managers will be more responsible for, were my employees here the whole week? Did they have to do any overtime? Did we make sure they're properly compensated and taken care of, and so on? The matrix approval process can take information from a scheduling system, or it can work independently. It can link back to finance, ERP, HR, payroll, to make sure that these systems are also updated with the appropriate timesheet data. So that's fairly key. We didn't show it to you here, but time control includes both a web-based and a mobile interface. So if you are logging in from your iPhone or your BlackBerry or your Android device or your Windows device, whether that's Windows Mobile 7, Windows or 8, you're able to log right into TimeControl and update your timesheet or do your approval for your department right from your device. The system is also compliant with a tablet, so that you can do your work right from a tablet. It is a web-based system that has been designed with this in mind. You'll see that for smaller devices like an iPhone, it works both in portrait and in landscape. It will flip the interface and resize itself if you flip back and forth. And we're not looking at the original timesheet interface here. We're looking at something custom designed for a mobile device. All of that's done so that we can make sure that people who are traveling or have only access to mobile right now are able to take advantage of completing their timesheet. The system is available both for purchase and for subscription. It can be subscribed to online. The system is multilingual. It includes expense tracking aside from the timesheet. There are automated validation approvals. There's something called time request to do vacation approvals. We can even do overtime request approvals inside of TimeControl. There are links to project management systems like Microsoft Project, Project Server, Primavera, links to ERP and finance systems like Dynamics, Oracle, or SAP. And it's compliant with a range of different kinds of requirements for government compliance, including the DCAA requirements. We've talked about links to different systems. HMS is a partner with a number of different technology companies, including Microsoft and Oracle and Deltek. We're well known in both the project management and the timesheet industries. You may recognize some of our clients. HMS has clients virtually all over the world, and a number of these clients, particularly those that are U.S. based, who have U.S. government contracts, are doing DCAA compliance and making sure they're compliant in part, at least for their labor charging system, with the timesheet from TimeControl. You'll find a number of different organizations and clients from a number of different industries in government, aerospace, engineering, defense, and high tech, and again, all over the world. We have dealers, distributors, and representatives in various parts of the world, and in particular in the U.S. there are numerous consultants that we work with, but HMS manages sales for the U.S. Often directly from our headquarters, which are based in Montreal or our offices in Toronto. The key for TimeControl, the key about what makes TimeControl unique, is its flexibility. The idea that it has a little bit of something for everybody based on what your requirements are. We knew that TimeControl would be used in a number of different requirements and with a number of different needs for different kinds of clients, and that's why you find so much flexibility in the way it can be configured. If you're interested in more information, you're actually able to try TimeControl right online with our free hosted trial system at freetrial.timecontrol.com. If you're interested in more information about DCAA compliance with TimeControl, you'll find a white paper as well as these slides available online by going to timecontrol.com/solutions/DCAA. And if you have any other questions or anything we can answer for you about how to be DCAA compliant with TimeControl, please come to the website or just email us at info@hmssoftware.ca. Thank you for your time today, and we look forward to taking care of you and helping you with your DCAA compliance.